Before we begin, here is a quick note for anyone who enjoys deep, carefully researched explorations of biblical history. Feel free to subscribe if you want more long-form investigations into topics most people never hear explained in full. Today we are stepping into one of the most complex and least understood questions in ancient theology. What the angels were actually doing before the world existed, before our measurable time began, and before the foundations of the earth were laid. The sources that describe this period are rare, fragmented, and often poetic, but when placed together, they reveal a surprisingly coherent picture of purpose, order, and activity within the unseen realm. Long before the cosmos emerged from nothing, Scripture hints that divine beings already existed within a structured hierarchy. The Book of Job contains one of the earliest clues, describing morning stars shouting for joy when the earth's foundations were set, suggesting they predated the physical world itself. Early Jewish scholars treated this not as metaphor, but as a chronological detail. The celestial host was present before creation, conscious, organized, and capable of response. Yet what they were doing in this pre-material era remains one of the oldest unanswered questions in biblical interpretation. To understand this period, researchers turn to a cross-section of sources: the Tanakh, Near Eastern cultural context, early apocryphal writings, and commentary from the Second Temple period. None of these provide a full narrative, but each contributes a perspective. Together they point to a realm defined by order rather than chaos, activity rather than stillness, and a purposeful alignment around divine intent. The earliest roles of angels appear closely connected to what would later unfold in human history, suggesting their existence was not incidental, but foundational to the structure of the universe. The Hebrew Bible often describes God's throne room not as an empty space, but as a functioning assembly. Several passages imply the existence of a divine council, a concept familiar throughout the ancient Near East, but with a distinctly monotheistic adaptation in Israelite theology. The presence of this heavenly council before the creation of the world suggests that angels were not idle observers. Instead, they may have participated in witnessing or affirming the divine decrees that established cosmic order. This does not mean they shaped creation, but the biblical language implies they were present when the decisions were proclaimed. The earliest angelic activity appears to be centered on worship, alignment, and obedience. Early Jewish writings describe celestial beings harmonizing themselves to the will of God through ordered praise, not as ritualistic singing, but as a stabilizing force within the heavenly realm. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain poetic fragments that depict angels engaging in antiphonal worship, structured like a choir but functioning as a symbol of cosmic harmony. Scholars believe these descriptions reflect traditions that viewed angelic praise as an act that sustains order, mirroring the stability later seen in the natural world. Another strand of tradition suggests that angels had administrative roles even before creation. Texts like Jubilees and 1 Enoch assign certain angels to domains such as the elements, the courses of the sun and moon, and the patterns of time. While these texts speak mostly of their duties within the created world, the earliest layers of interpretation hint that these responsibilities may have originated in a non-material form before physical nature existed. In other words, angels prepared to oversee what would later appear, rehearsing functions connected to seasons, boundaries, and cosmic law. It is important to recognize that none of these sources describe angels as creators. Ancient Judaism maintained a strict distinction between the divine creator and all heavenly beings, but the concept that angels participated in the ordering, the structuring of cosmic administration, is supported by both biblical language and early commentary. They appear as witnesses and stewards, created not to shape the world, but to operate within the framework God established. Hierarchy also plays a central role in understanding their pre-creation activity. Many early theologians, including both Jewish and Christian interpreters, suggested that angels were created in ranks. Higher orders, such as cherubim and seraphim, may have preceded others. If so, the earliest angelic actions were likely related to establishing this structure, learning their place, orienting themselves toward divine authority, and integrating into a hierarchy that functioned with perfect unity. This form of ordered coexistence was not passive. It required discipline, awareness, and purposeful alignment. The question arises, what did they do in a realm without time or matter? Scholars emphasize that doing must be understood differently in the context of the heavenly realm. Their activities were not physical tasks, but functions of identity, witnessing divine decrees, participating in heavenly assembly, maintaining harmony, and preparing for future stewardship. The absence of physical matter does not imply inactivity, but rather a different mode of existence, one defined by intellect, worship, observation, and readiness. Imagery from early Jewish mysticism expands on this concept by portraying angels as beings who practiced roles they would later fulfill once humans appeared. Guardian angels learned the dynamics of protection. Messengers refined the patterns of communication that would one day be recorded in Scripture. Ministering spirits aligned themselves to respond to commands they had not yet been issued. These descriptions are symbolic, but point to a deeper idea. The heavenly realm operated with intentionality long before humanity entered the scene. Archaeological insight into Near Eastern cosmology further supports this perspective. Cultures surrounding ancient Israel often describe the spiritual realm as fully functional before the world's creation, complete with councils, guardians, and cosmic administrators. The Hebrew tradition diverged sharply in theology, but retained the idea that spiritual beings had established roles before creation. The biblical account reflects this inherited cultural framework, while giving it distinct theological grounding. When Scripture depicts angels rejoicing at the creation of the world, scholars note a significant detail. Their joy suggests recognition, not surprise. It implies they understood the significance of what they were witnessing, that creation was not a random event, but the fulfillment of a plan that had existed long before time began. Their presence at the boundary between the eternal and the temporal marks them as informed participants, not accidental observers. In this view, the earliest era of angelic existence represents a phase of preparation, structure, and alignment, rather than physical action. Their tasks were real, but adapted to a realm without matter or chronology. They served as the first inhabitants of divine order, establishing harmony in the unseen realm, so the visible world could be built upon the same foundation. Thus, before the birth of stars or the shaping of the earth, angels existed within a structured, intentional, highly organized reality. Their earliest activities revolved around orientation toward God, participation in heavenly governance, the cultivation of cosmic harmony, and the anticipation of a world not yet formed. And when creation finally began, they were ready. Not because they understood every detail, but because they had already been living within the order that would define the universe itself. Long before the first human raised a question about the unseen world, ancient interpreters were already wrestling with a deeper mystery. If angels existed prior to the material cosmos, what kind of environment did they inhabit? Scripture describes no landscapes, no celestial geography, no terrain of gold or crystal before creation. Instead, the pre-cosmic realm appears as a domain defined purely by divine presence, a space without spatial dimensions, a reality without sequence, an existence where beings operated outside the boundaries that later shaped human life. Understanding what angels did in such a realm requires stepping into a conceptual world far removed from physical experience, yet deeply rooted in biblical and early Jewish thought. The Hebrew Bible offers one of the few anchors for exploring that world. In passages where God consults the heavenly assembly, interpreters see echoes of angelic deliberation already functioning before creation. These scenes do not depict casual conversation, but formal proceedings within a structured hierarchy. The council-like imagery suggests roles, responsibilities, and communication patterns that predate matter. Before a single star burned in the sky, heavenly beings may have been participating in forms of organization that later mirrored earthly governance, not ruling over anything material, but aligning themselves according to divine command. Scholars often compare these biblical references to the broader Near Eastern idea of a celestial council. In neighboring cultures, heavenly beings acted as advisors or witnesses to divine decisions regarding creation, kingship, and cosmic order. While Israel's theological framework differs profoundly, the conceptual parallel remains. The divine realm was not imagined as empty or solitary. Instead, it was depicted as an ordered society of spiritual beings who existed in relationship to God and one another, forming a structure of roles long before any physical universe emerged. If the earliest angelic activity took place within such structured hierarchy, what did that activity look like? One of the clearest clues comes from early liturgical traditions preserved in Second Temple literature. These writings describe angels engaging in forms of worship characterized by precision, unity, and intentionality rather than emotion or spontaneity. Their praise was not ornamental, it was functional, a means of expressing alignment with divine authority. In a realm without physical time, rhythmic worship served as a symbol of perfect order. Each voice represented not a musical contribution, but a declaration of purpose, embodying the heavenly host's identity as servants of the divine. This idea is supported by fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which describe angelic praise in ways that imply pre-material significance. The descriptions are not limited to worship after creation. Instead, they appear to portray angelic praise as an eternal activity, already fully operative before the cosmos took shape. Scholars examine these texts carefully, aware that they employ poetic language, yet they consistently reveal a worldview in which heavenly beings function through alignment and obedience rather than physical action. Worship was not an event, it was a mode of existence. But pre-creation activity extended beyond worship. Many early Jewish texts describe angels appointed as guardians or stewards over cosmic domains. The Book of Jubilees, for example, assigns angelic roles connected to the elements, the cycles of the sun and moon, and the ordering of seasons. While these responsibilities clearly operate within the created world, their origin may lie in earlier pre-material roles. Interpreters suggest these angels may have been trained or prepared for cosmic stewardship in a purely spiritual context, rehearsing duties that would only later take material form. Their earliest work was anticipatory, not reactive. This perspective fits with the broader pattern found in apocryphal literature, where angels often appear as beings entrusted with knowledge before physical reality unfolds. In some traditions, angels learn the structure of the cosmos in advance, understanding the logic of divine order even before matter responds to it. This anticipatory knowledge does not imply that angels shaped the universe, but it suggests that they were aware of the framework within which creation would occur. They functioned as observers and witnesses to the unfolding of divine will, attending the transition from timeless existence to a universe governed by sequences and boundaries. Hierarchy itself becomes a central theme in this early era. Several ancient commentators emphasize that angelic hosts were created in ranks, with certain beings possessing greater proximity to the divine presence than others. If creation unfolded in stages, angelic order may have been established in stages as well. Higher orders, such as seraphim and cherubim, may have existed prior to other ranks. Their earliest activity would therefore have involved anchoring the hierarchy, embodying specific roles, and establishing an order that later served as the template for divine governance across the cosmos. Within this emerging hierarchy, scholars identify three broad categories of pre-creation activity. The first involves contemplation, the act of perceiving divine wisdom. This is not passive observation, but an active engagement with the nature of divine purpose. The second involves alignment, the internal orientation of each being toward its designated role within the celestial order. And the third involves participation, engagement in the heavenly assembly, where decisions regarding the structure of reality were proclaimed. None of these activities required physical matter, yet they defined the earliest identity of the angelic host. A striking detail emerges from early Christian theological writings. Angels may have been granted knowledge not only of creation's structure, but also of future events involving humanity. This view does not appear explicitly in Scripture, but early interpreters inferred it from passages that describe angels ministering to future generations or rejoicing at human salvation. If angels were aware of humanity before humans existed, their pre-creation activities may have included preparation for roles they would later fulfill: guidance, guardianship, and communication. In this view, angels did not merely exist before creation. They trained for the responsibilities that would shape human destiny. It is crucial to emphasize that none of these interpretations elevate angels beyond their biblical function. Ancient Judaism maintained a strict boundary between creator and created beings. Angels do not co-create. They do not manipulate divine plans. Their pre-creation activity is consistently portrayed as subordinate to the divine will. They participate not by shaping the world, but by preparing to operate within it according to roles already established in the heavenly order. From a documentary perspective, this paints a picture of a realm operating with remarkable sophistication. The unseen world was not silent or static. It was structured, disciplined, and filled with purpose. Angelic beings existed within a fully functional system of hierarchy, worship, administration, contemplation, and preparation. They did not wait idly for creation to begin. They lived within an eternal order whose patterns would later echo in the physical universe. Their earliest tasks, therefore, were not limited to the spiritual realm. They were prototypes for the stewardship roles they would one day carry out across the created world. What emerges from all this scholarship is a consistent theme. Angelic existence before creation was characterized by purposeful activity, not inactivity. Whether through worship, participation in heavenly governance, mastering their respective roles, or preparing for future responsibilities, angels inhabited a realm where identity and purpose preceded material form. Their earliest tasks were extensions of their very nature, to align with the divine will, embody celestial order, and stand ready for a universe whose foundations had not yet been laid. When scholars attempt to reconstruct angelic activity before the creation of the physical world, one of the most revealing starting points is the language used in ancient cosmology. The biblical worldview does not treat creation as the beginning of all existence. Rather, it marks the moment when material existence began. Prior to that moment, a different kind of reality operated, one not governed by the laws of physics, nor shaped by matter, nor defined by temporal sequence. Angels functioned within this realm, and their tasks reflected the nature of a world where experience was measured not in hours or distances, but in alignment with divine intent. This is why early Jewish and Christian commentators consistently emphasized order, hierarchy, and purpose as the central features of angelic existence before creation. The book of Job provides a rare glimpse into this pre-creation reality when it describes heavenly beings rejoicing as the foundations of the earth were set. The phrasing implies that these beings had already existed long enough to understand what was happening. Their celebration was not instinctive, but informed. They recognized creation as a milestone within a larger divine blueprint. This suggests that angelic knowledge predates physical reality, and that their first activities involved intellectual awareness rather than physical action. To explore this idea further, scholars turn to texts from the Second Temple period, many of which expand upon the biblical portrayal of the heavenly realm. Warren Enoch, Jubilees, and various liturgical fragments from Qumran describe multiple categories of angels, some associated with cosmic phenomena, others with divine secrets, and still others with worship. While these texts were written long after the earliest biblical traditions, they preserve ideas that likely originated from far older interpretive streams. One of the most significant themes is the notion that angels were entrusted with knowledge of creation before creation happened. This knowledge is not described as architect-level understanding, but as awareness of the order God intended to establish. Angels were depicted as standing witnesses to the transition between eternal existence and the formation of the physical universe. Their earliest participation, therefore, appears to be connected to witnessing divine proclamation. In biblical language, God speaks creation into existence. Angels, already conscious and organized, hear that speech, and according to early interpreters, they respond with recognition. an acknowledgement that the divine plan is now entering a new phase. The idea of angels witnessing creation aligns with the biblical concept of the divine council. In several Old Testament passages, God is portrayed addressing heavenly beings when making significant decisions. While these scenes occur after creation, their structure implies that the council itself predates the world. The existence of such a council in the pre-creation era would mean that angels participated intellectually in the unfolding of divine intention. They did not advise God, but served as the audience to whom divine order was revealed. If witnessing was their earliest role, then observation becomes a central feature of pre-creation angelic activity. But observation in this context is not passive. It involves perceiving, comprehending, and internalizing the structure of reality as it unfolds. Early commentators often described angelic understanding as intuitive rather than progressive. Angels grasped divine commands immediately and fully, without the process of learning through trial and error. This suggests that their earliest tasks were shaped around the reception of knowledge, a concept reflected in later Jewish teachings that portray angels as custodians of heavenly wisdom. Another early activity connected to this period is organization. The idea that angels were structured into ranks before creation is supported by both biblical implication and early theological reflection. Seraphim, cherubim, archangels, and various orders of ministering spirits appear throughout Scripture. These roles are not presented as evolutionary developments, but as established categories. This indicates that hierarchy itself may have been part of the earliest divine acts, creating a celestial society where each being's nature corresponded to its role. Within this hierarchy, scholars identify distinct functions that existed even before creation took physical form. Higher-ranking beings are consistently associated with proximity to the divine presence, while other angels are connected to tasks involving communication or stewardship. If these distinctions existed before matter, then angelic activity involved understanding one's role, aligning with it, and performing actions appropriate to that identity within a realm where physical exertion does not apply. This means that their earliest work was vocational rather than physical, fulfilling identity by participating in divine order. Second Temple literature adds another layer to this picture by suggesting that angels rehearsed roles they would later fulfill within the created universe. This theme appears in writings that describe angels practicing worship, overseeing symbolic representations of cosmic phenomena, or participating in heavenly ceremonies that mirror future earthly rituals. While these descriptions must be interpreted carefully, scholars see in them an attempt to articulate how angels prepared for responsibilities that would only later manifest materially. Their earliest activities were thus anticipatory, shaped by divine foresight rather than immediate necessity. The idea of preparation aligns with another key theme in early Jewish thought: the pre-existence of divine law. Several ancient interpretations suggest that concepts such as justice, order, and wisdom existed before creation. If these principles preceded the cosmos, then angels participated in them before they had physical expression. For example, angelic beings associated with justice or judgment may have embodied these principles before any human action required judgment. Their earliest tasks reflected eternal truths that would later take on concrete form in human life. One of the more intriguing insights from early Christian commentary involves the possibility that angels understood not only the structure of creation, but also aspects of humanity's future role within it. This interpretation stems from passages that describe angels ministering to humans, rejoicing at human salvation, or contending with forces that affect human destiny. If angels were aware of these future events, their pre-creation activity may have included preparation for interactions with beings who did not yet exist. They may have anticipated their responsibilities long before those responsibilities took shape within history. In this context, angelic stewardship is not simply a reaction to human need, but an extension of roles established before time. The idea that angels were created with purpose suggests that their earliest activities involved internalizing that purpose, aligning themselves with it, and preparing to carry it out. This aligns with the broader biblical theme that creation unfolds according to an ordered plan, a plan in which the heavenly realm and the earthly realm are interconnected rather than isolated. Another important aspect of pre-creation activity is celestial harmony. Early Jewish texts frequently describe the heavenly host as operating in perfect unity. This unity is not simply emotional or ceremonial. It is structural. Each being's identity is aligned with divine will, and their actions, whether worship, observation, or preparation, contribute to the stability of the realm. This theme anticipates the natural harmony later seen in creation, where celestial bodies follow ordered paths and ecosystems maintain balanced interactions. The unity of the heavenly host is thus portrayed as the prototype for the unity of the cosmos. As scholars examine these themes, a larger picture emerges. Angels existed within a system of meaning long before the physical universe took shape. Their tasks, identities, and roles were already in motion. They were not passive spectators waiting for creation to begin. They were conscious participants in an ordered spiritual reality that laid the conceptual foundation for the material world. Their earliest activities reflect the same values that later shaped creation: order, purpose, hierarchy, alignment, stewardship, and the recognition of divine authority. This understanding transforms the question of what angels did before creation. They did not build, travel, or engage in physical tasks. Instead, they participated in a realm where existence itself was defined by relationship to God. Their earliest work was intellectual, spiritual, and organizational, witnessing divine decrees, embodying hierarchical roles, rehearsing future responsibilities, and living within a harmony that predated the cosmos. The deeper scholars explore these traditions, the more apparent it becomes that angelic existence before creation was not a pause before action, but the first movement of a larger symphony, one that would extend into the structure of the universe itself. To understand the earliest activities of angels before the creation of the material world, scholars must consider a profound challenge. Nearly every description of angelic function in Scripture is tied to events that occur after the cosmos comes into existence. Angels appear delivering messages, contending with spiritual forces, guarding nations, guiding prophets, and responding to divine commands within history. But what were they doing before history existed? To answer this, researchers must reverse engineer their roles, tracing their functions backward through textual patterns, theological logic, and ancient interpretive traditions. This reconstruction reveals a realm that operated according to principles that predate matter itself. One of the foundational insights comes from analyzing divine speech in Genesis. When God begins creating, the text indicates that process, order, and command are central. God speaks, and creation responds. Early interpreters reasoned that if angels existed before the world, they too would have responded to divine speech, but in ways consistent with a spiritual environment. Their earliest activity, then, likely involved being addressed by God and responding with obedience, recognition, and alignment. This response is not physical movement. Rather, it is a relational orientation, a kind of attentiveness that defines their identity within the heavenly realm. Evidence for this can be found in later biblical passages where God speaks directly to heavenly beings. These scenes show angels receiving communication, acknowledging divine decisions, and accepting roles within a wider structure. By projecting this dynamic backward into the pre-creation era, scholars conclude that angels were already functioning as the audience of divine proclamation. They were the first recipients of communication in a universe not yet formed, and their earliest work involved participating in a communication pattern that later shaped the structure of revelation itself. Another insight comes from considering the nature of order in the heavenly realm. Scripture consistently portrays angels as beings who operate according to hierarchy. They belong to distinct categories, some closer to the divine presence, others assigned to tasks of communication or stewardship. This hierarchy is not depicted as something that evolved over time, but as something inherent to their creation. If hierarchy existed before the cosmos, then establishing and aligning within that hierarchy were among the earliest angelic activities. This alignment was not competitive. Ancient interpreters describe angelic hierarchy as perfectly harmonious, with no friction or ambiguity. Before creation, each angelic being would have understood its function, its level of authority, and its place within the divine order. Their earliest actions therefore involved inhabiting their identities, internalizing their roles, and participating in a system where each being's nature and purpose were fully integrated. The notion of angelic rehearsal, one of the most intriguing concepts in early Jewish mysticism, becomes particularly relevant in this period. Several writings depict angels performing symbolic actions that foreshadow their roles in the created world. These texts describe angels acting as guardians, healers, messengers, and observers long before humans existed. While these descriptions are metaphorical, they serve as interpretive tools for understanding pre-creation activity. They imply that angels practiced forms of stewardship, guardianship, and worship that would later manifest materially. For example, if certain angels were destined to guide the movement of stars and seasons, early interpreters reasoned that these angels would have existed in a pre-material phase where they understood their roles conceptually. They rehearsed the patterns of cosmic order before those patterns became visible in nature. This means their earliest activities involved understanding laws, not yet expressed through matter, that would later govern creation. This idea resonates with a broader theme in ancient theology, that divine law existed before the world. Concepts such as justice, order, wisdom, and harmony were believed to be eternal. If angels were created before the world, they participated in these laws before they were expressed physically. Angels associated with justice may have embodied and upheld the principle even before any creature existed to require judgment. Their earliest tasks reflect the eternal character of divine law rather than situational responses to human behavior. In addition to participation in divine law, angels appear to have played a role in maintaining stability within the heavenly realm. Although Scripture does not describe pre-creation conflict among angels, later traditions emphasize the importance of harmony. The heavenly host is consistently portrayed as united, aligned, and free of disorder. This unity did not emerge automatically. It required angels to orient themselves toward a shared purpose and act in accordance with divine will. Their earliest work, therefore, included sustaining harmony, a task that mirrors the natural balance observed later in creation. Early Christian theologians expanded this concept, proposing that angelic stability served as a model for the structure of the universe. If the heavenly realm operated in perfect unity, then creation itself was designed to reflect that unity in physical form. Stars following predictable paths, ecosystems maintaining balance, and seasons unfolding in rhythm all express patterns of harmony that may have originated in the pre-creation activities of the heavenly host. Angels embodied the principles that creation would later imitate. Another dimension of pre-creation activity involves knowledge. Several traditions suggest that angels possessed awareness of divine mysteries before the material world existed. While this knowledge was limited compared to the infinite divine mind, it was nevertheless profound. Angels understood the logic of divine decisions, the meaning of divine speech, and the trajectory of creation before humans experienced it. Their earliest activities therefore involved contemplation, perceiving and internalizing divine wisdom. In this model, contemplation is not passive reflection, but an active alignment with divine purpose. This contemplative activity is closely tied to worship. In early Jewish literature, worship is described not as entertainment or ritual, but as the expression of perfect understanding. Angels worship because they recognize divine truth. Before creation, their worship was the first expression of cosmic order. It was the way they participated in a reality shaped by divine wisdom. This means that worship itself, structured, harmonious, intentional, was one of the earliest forms of angelic activity, and it defined the environment in which creation would later unfold. The relationship between contemplation and worship also helps explain why angels appear so frequently involved in communication throughout Scripture. Their capacity to deliver messages, interpret visions, and guide human prophets likely originated in their earliest ability to receive, comprehend, and respond to divine communication. Long before they spoke to humans, angels learned to listen. Their pre-creation activities involved developing the very skills they would later use to interact with the physical world. In this sense, angelic communication is not a learned behavior, but an essential part of their identity. One of the most compelling insights from early commentary involves the idea that angels anticipated the role of humanity long before humans existed. Texts that describe angels ministering to humans or rejoicing at human salvation often imply prior awareness of humanity's purpose. This suggests that angels prepared for interactions with humans even before creation, practicing forms of guardianship, guidance, and stewardship that would later become central to their missions. Their earliest activities thus bridge the gap between the eternal and the temporal, connecting divine intention to future human destiny. Taken together, these themes reveal a consistent picture. Before the world existed, angels operated within a fully functional realm defined by order, purpose, harmony, knowledge, contemplation, and worship. Their earliest activities were not limited by physical constraints. Instead, they reflected the fundamental principles that would later govern the universe. This pre-creation era, therefore, is not a blank space, but a structured environment where angelic existence expressed the eternal character of divine wisdom. The more scholars analyze these traditions, the clearer it becomes that the earliest actions of angels were not merely preliminary events, but foundational patterns. These patterns shaped the structure of creation itself, providing a blueprint for the harmony and order that would later govern the visible world. When approaching the question of what angels did before the creation of the world, scholars often turn to a set of descriptions that appear throughout early Jewish and Christian writings. Angels as guardians, angels as watchers, angels as messengers, and angels as ministers of divine wisdom. These roles are typically associated with events that take place within human history, yet careful study reveals that these functions may have existed conceptually long before humans entered the scene. In this view, angels did not improvise their responses to the needs of creation. Rather, they inherited roles that were established in a realm where matter did not yet exist, and those roles shaped their earliest actions. One of the most significant concepts from early Jewish interpretation is the idea that certain angels were created with a distinct orientation toward humanity, even before humanity itself existed. Texts such as Warren Enoch and the Book of Jubilees describe angels associated with teaching, guiding, or overseeing humanity's future moral development. While these writings reflect later theological developments, they preserve a tradition that angels were designed with human interaction in mind. This means that their pre-creation activities may have included preparing for roles that would be fulfilled only after the world came into being. This idea aligns with the broader pattern found in apocryphal texts, where angels are described rehearsing their functions. The term rehearsal should not be understood literally. Rather, it reflects a conceptual framework where heavenly beings acted out the patterns of responsibility assigned to them. For example, if certain angels were destined to serve as guardians over nations, their earliest activities may have involved understanding and internalizing the principles that would govern their oversight. They were not practicing with physical nations, but they were practicing with knowledge, learning the structure of divine justice, the meaning of stewardship, and the order they would later maintain among human societies. This brings us to a crucial insight. Knowledge preceded action in the pre-creation realm. Angels are consistently depicted as beings of understanding, capable of recognizing divine truth and acting accordingly. Before creation, they participated in intellectual and spiritual activity designed to prepare them for future responsibilities. This early engagement with divine wisdom played a key role in shaping their identity. They were not passive beings awaiting commands. They were conscious participants in a realm where purpose existed before matter. Some of the most intriguing references come from Second Temple literature, where angels are described as stewards over cosmic forces such as winds, stars, and seasons. While these texts focus on their roles within the physical world, Their structure implies that angelic stewardship originated in a non-material context. Before stars burned or seasons rotated, angels understood the principles of cosmic order. Their earliest activities, then, may have involved comprehending the logic behind these cycles, preparing to oversee them once they appeared. In this sense, the spiritual functions of angels existed before their material counterparts. The broader biblical theme that divine law existed before creation also sheds light on early angelic roles. If principles like justice, righteousness, and truth were eternal, then angels embodied these principles before they had physical expression. For instance, angels associated with justice may have upheld that principle conceptually before any creature required judgment. Their pre-creation activity would therefore involve aligning themselves with divine law, internalizing its meaning, and participating in a realm where justice existed as a pure idea rather than a reaction to human wrongdoing. Another important aspect involves the concept of the heavenly books found in early Jewish traditions. While these books often appear in contexts of judgment or remembrance, some interpreters suggest they symbolize the pre-creation order of divine knowledge. The idea is not that angels wrote or managed literal books before creation, but that they participated in a system where knowledge was organized, preserved, and aligned with divine will. Their earliest activities may have included engaging with this structure of knowledge, understanding the decisions and patterns that would later shape the universe. This form of participation also connects to the idea of celestial governance. The Bible occasionally depicts God addressing heavenly beings when making significant decisions. These scenes suggest that angels functioned as an audience to divine governance, witnessing the unfolding of plans that predated human history. Their earliest activity may therefore have involved engaging in forms of governance that existed before any physical kingdom or nation. Scholars interpret these scenes not as democratic interactions, but as expressions of divine sovereignty, where angels play a witnessing role, affirming the authority of divine decision-making. The concept of witnessing plays a crucial role in understanding angelic identity. In ancient thought, to witness an event was to participate in its meaning. Angels witnessing the earliest divine decrees were participating in a process that shaped the universe. They understood the significance of creation before creation happened. Their earliest activity was therefore intellectual recognition, a form of acknowledgement that affirmed the divine plan. This recognition is tied closely to the concept of joy in the book of Job, where angelic beings celebrate the setting of Earth's foundations. Scholars note that joy in this context is not spontaneous enthusiasm, but informed response. Angels celebrated not merely because creation was beautiful, but because they recognized the unfolding of a plan they had long understood. Their joy reflects comprehension, preparation, and alignment with divine purpose. Another significant theme involves interangelic interaction. Scripture rarely describes angels acting in isolation. They appear as members of a vast host, organized, coordinated, and relational. Before creation, this host may have already operated within a system of interdependence. Angels supported one another, learned from one another, and functioned collectively. Their earliest activities likely included forming relationships within the heavenly hierarchy, strengthening the unity that later served as a model for human community. This interdependence is especially evident in early mystical texts, where angels are described participating in complex celestial ceremonies. While these ceremonies often use symbolic language, they reflect a worldview where angels work together in harmony. The unity of the heavenly host was not accidental. It was part of their earliest activity. They practiced unity before the cosmos expressed unity through natural order. Perhaps the most profound insight from early theological interpretation is that angels fulfilled symbolic roles before they fulfilled historical ones. Their earliest activities involved embodying principles such as truth, justice, order, protection, communication, and worship before those principles took physical form. Angels lived these principles before creation expressed them. In this sense, the pre-creation realm is depicted not as an empty void, but as a fully functional environment where spiritual beings lived out the very patterns that creation would later imitate. Their earliest actions formed the conceptual foundation of the universe. What creation became in physical form is a reflection of what angels embodied spiritually. This understanding reframes the entire discussion. The earliest angelic activities were not preliminary tasks, but expressions of eternal realities. They engaged in worship, because worship reflects alignment with divine truth. They participated in governance because governance reflects divine authority. They internalized divine law because divine law reflects the nature of God. Before the world existed, angels lived in a realm where meaning preceded matter. Their earliest activities were the first echoes of the order that would later shape the cosmos. As scholars trace the origins of angelic function back into the pre-creation era, a striking pattern emerges. Nearly every role angels fulfill within the created world is rooted in a principle that predates matter itself. This observation has led researchers to explore the idea that angelic identity is inseparable from eternal divine attributes. In other words, what angels did before the creation of the world was not a set of discrete tasks, but the expression of principles that always existed in the divine mind. These principles, order, wisdom, justice, communication, harmony, and stewardship, would later become the structural backbone of the physical universe. In this sense, angels acted as the first manifestations of divine order, participating in realities that had not yet taken material form. This perspective helps explain why Scripture portrays angels as fully prepared the moment creation begins. They appear in the narrative already able to communicate, already capable of decision-making, already aware of divine authority, and already situated within a functioning hierarchy. These capabilities did not develop over time. They originated in the pre-creation realm, where angels existed in perfect alignment with divine intent. Their earliest activities therefore involved cultivating, inhabiting, and expressing qualities that would later define their interactions with creation. One of the most significant of these qualities is wisdom. Early Jewish texts consistently emphasize that angels possess profound knowledge, not omniscience, but a deep comprehension of divine order. Wisdom in these writings is not merely information. It is the ability to perceive the structure behind reality. If angels existed before creation, then their earliest activities involved contemplating divine wisdom in its pure, unexpressed form. This contemplation forms the core of angelic identity. They operated as intellectual beings in a realm where understanding was the primary mode of existence. Early Christian theologians elaborated on this concept by describing angels as mirrors that reflect divine light. In this metaphor, angels did not generate wisdom. They received it, internalized it, and expressed it back toward the divine source. Before creation, this process of reflection would have constituted one of their most foundational activities. Their role was to align their intellectual awareness with the structure of divine truth, forming a community of beings united not by physical proximity, but by shared comprehension. The idea of angels as reflectors of divine wisdom also helps explain their role in communication. Throughout Scripture, angels function as messengers, not because they carry information physically, but because they process and transmit meaning with perfect clarity. Their ability to interpret and deliver divine communication must therefore have existed before creation. In the pre-material realm, angels learned to receive divine speech, understand its significance, and express it accurately. They became conduits of meaning, preparing for a future where communication between heaven and earth would play a critical role in human history. This preparation also ties into the concept of stewardship. Apocryphal writings describe angels associated with various aspects of the created world: winds, stars, nations, and natural cycles. While these roles fully manifest only after creation, their origins likely lie in the pre-creation environment. Angels designated as stewards would have understood the principles governing their future responsibilities long before they took material form. For example, an angel associated with the seasonal cycle would first comprehend the logic of time and order before overseeing those cycles within nature. Their earliest activities, therefore, involved mastering principles that would later shape the cosmos. Another essential element of early angelic function is harmony. Scripture and early Jewish tradition portray the heavenly host as unified, coordinated, and perfectly aligned. This harmony is not incidental, but foundational. It reflects the nature of the divine order that angels were created to embody. Before creation, this harmony would have been one of their primary activities, maintaining relational unity within the celestial hierarchy. Their interactions formed an ecosystem of spiritual cooperation, mirroring the balance and interdependence later observed in the natural world. This harmony is closely tied to the concept of worship, which emerges as one of the earliest and most significant angelic activities. Worship in this context is not emotional expression, but the acknowledgement of divine truth. It is the act of recognizing and affirming the nature of God. Before creation, worship was the first expression of cosmic order. It reflected the structure of a realm where every being aligned perfectly with divine will. Scholars view this pre-creation worship as the foundation upon which all later worship, human or angelic, is built. But worship also had a functional dimension. Several fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls describe heavenly worship as a stabilizing force within the cosmic order. Angels did not worship because creation depended on it physically, but because worship defined the spiritual order that creation would later mirror. In this view, their earliest activity was not simply devotion, but participation in the very rhythm of divine existence. Worship formed the first patterns of harmony, order, and relational alignment. Beyond worship, another significant pre-creation activity is participation in divine governance. The Bible occasionally depicts God addressing the heavenly assembly when making important decisions. While these scenes take place after creation, their structure implies that the heavenly council predates the world. Angels did not assist in creation, but they bore witness to the divine decrees that shaped the universe. Their earliest activity, therefore, included witnessing the first expressions of divine will. This witnessing role is not passive. In ancient thought, to witness a divine act is to affirm its legitimacy and participate in its order. The concept of governance also relates to the idea that angels had authority over future domains. Many commentators propose that angels were assigned responsibilities that would only later take form, domains such as nations, natural forces, or roles within revelation. Their earliest activities, then, included understanding the boundaries of their authority and aligning themselves with the responsibilities that awaited them. They became stewards not by accident but by design, shaped by the knowledge of roles they had not yet fulfilled. This brings us to one of the most profound themes in early angelology: anticipation. Angels understood that creation was not the beginning of their story, but the next phase of a larger divine plan. Their earliest activities involved preparing for interactions with beings who did not yet exist. They anticipated the emergence of humanity, the structure of covenant relationships, and the future order of revelation. They internalized the meaning of divine law before law was written. They participated in spiritual harmony before nature reflected that harmony physically. In this sense, the pre-creation realm was not an empty stage awaiting the arrival of the cosmos. It was a fully functional environment where divine principles were lived out before they were lived out in matter. Angels operated in a realm where meaning preceded form, purpose preceded action, and identity preceded activity. Their earliest work was the expression of eternal truths, truths that would later shape the structure of the universe. As researchers synthesize these insights, they uncover a picture of angelic existence defined by deep intellectual engagement, relational unity, disciplined worship, and anticipatory stewardship. Before the world existed, angels were already living out the patterns that would govern creation itself. Their earliest activities were not beginnings, but continuations, expressions of realities that had no starting point because they existed eternally within the divine mind. As scholars push deeper into the mystery of angelic activity before the creation of the world, an essential question emerges. If angels existed in a realm without matter, without time, without physical motion, How did they act at all? To answer this, interpreters emphasize that angelic action before creation must be understood in non-physical terms. Their activities were expressions of identity, alignment, and participation in divine purpose. Actions carried out in a reality structured not by physics, but by intention. This perspective reveals a realm filled with meaning even before the first atom existed, and it positions angels as the earliest participants in that meaning. One of the most important frameworks for understanding this activity comes from exploring what Scripture, Apocrypha, and early commentary emphasize about angels. They are beings of intellect and will, not instinct and matter. Their earliest actions therefore reflect intellectual and moral capacities. Before creation, angels engaged in processes of recognition, response, understanding, and alignment. These capacities shape their later role in history, but they also offer insight into what they were doing in that earlier, non-material state. The concept of recognition appears throughout the biblical narrative. Angels consistently demonstrate the ability to perceive divine truth instantly and respond without hesitation. This characteristic did not begin at creation. It existed beforehand. Before the universe took physical form, angels recognized divine authority simply by being in the presence of God. Their earliest actions therefore included responding to divine presence through acknowledgement, an act of willing alignment that later became visible through worship and obedience. A second foundational activity is understanding. Early Jewish and Christian writers consistently describe angels as possessing remarkable knowledge. Not infinite knowledge, but a depth of understanding far beyond human capacity. This understanding included the structure of divine order before that order became physical. Angels comprehended concepts such as justice, truth, harmony, and purpose long before those concepts were expressed in the rhythms of nature or the moral decisions of human beings. Their earliest actions thus involved contemplating divine wisdom in its pure form, not as abstract theory, but as living reality within the heavenly realm. This contemplation leads naturally into the idea of alignment, one of the most essential aspects of pre-creation angelic activity. Angels were created with specific roles and identities, and they existed within a structured hierarchy. Their earliest actions therefore included internalizing their place within this hierarchy and orienting themselves toward the responsibilities that matched their nature. Higher-order beings, such as cherubim and seraphim, aligned themselves with proximity to divine presence. Messengers aligned themselves with the communication of divine truth. Stewardship-oriented angels aligned themselves with the principles that would later govern natural and historical order. This alignment was not coercive, it was intrinsic. It expressed who they were created to be. A fourth activity involves participation in heavenly order. Scripture presents the heavenly realm as organized, coordinated, and filled with purposeful activity. Even before creation, angels likely participated in patterns of cooperation, relational unity, and harmonious interaction. These patterns became the blueprint for the structure of the natural world. Just as stars would later follow consistent paths, angels before creation engaged in forms of harmony that reflected their unity with one another and with divine purpose. This unity is repeatedly emphasized in early Jewish literature, which describes the heavenly host as functioning like a single choir. Their worship, their understanding, and their interactions are depicted not as random or disconnected, but as perfectly integrated. Before creation, angels lived in a realm where all action was oriented toward a unified goal, the expression of divine order. Their earliest work, therefore, was communal. They existed not as isolated beings, but as participants in a larger, harmonious structure. This brings us to one of the most significant expressions of pre-creation activity: worship. Worship in the biblical worldview is not confined to singing or ritualistic expression. Instead, it reflects a deeper reality, the acknowledgement of divine truth through alignment of the will. Before creation, angels engaged in a form of worship that expressed their recognition of divine wisdom. Their worship served as the atmosphere of the heavenly realm, establishing the first rhythms of order that creation would later imitate. In this sense, worship was not a supplemental activity, but the core expression of their existence. But worship alone does not account for the full range of their activity. Another essential dimension is anticipation. Early interpreters frequently emphasize that angels were aware of divine plans long before those plans unfolded. When creation began, angels recognized it. When humans appeared, angels understood their significance. When salvation history took shape, angels knew they were witnessing long-awaited events. This awareness implies that before creation, angels did not merely reflect divine wisdom, they anticipated divine action. Their earliest activities included preparing for future roles that required knowledge long before matter existed. One striking example of this appears in early Christian commentary, where angels are described as anticipating humanity's role as bearers of the divine image. This anticipation would have shaped their pre-creation activities, leading them to embody principles such as guidance, protection, communication, and service, before they were ever expressed through interaction with human beings. Their earliest actions, then, were vocational rehearsals for responsibilities linked to a future world. Another dimension of pre-creation activity involves stewardship of non-material domains. Although angels would later govern natural phenomena such as winds, stars, and nations, early interpreters believed that their stewardship responsibilities existed conceptually before taking material form. For example, stewardship of time existed before hours and days. Stewardship of order existed before ecosystems. Stewardship of nations existed before geography. Angels participated in these domains not by controlling physical matter, but by internalizing the principles they would later oversee. This framework also sheds light on the concept of the heavenly council, a theme that appears in several biblical texts. Even though these scenes occur within creation, their structure implies that the council itself predates the world. In this council, angels served as witnesses to divine decrees, affirming the authority of divine decision-making. Their earliest participation therefore included attending to divine governance, acknowledging divine purpose, and reflecting divine authority within their roles. Understanding and affirming divine decisions was one of their first tasks. Knowledge plays a central role in this participation. Angels before creation did not simply receive knowledge, they ordered it. They understood how divine decisions related to one another. They perceived the relationships between eternal principles. They engaged in intellectual activity that shaped their identity as stewards, guardians, and messengers. In this way, knowledge was not merely an attribute, but an activity, the constant engagement with truth. Finally, one of the most profound themes in pre-creation angelology is embodiment of divine patterns. Long before matter existed, angels embodied the order that creation would later reflect. Their unity mirrored cosmic harmony. Their worship mirrored natural rhythm. Their hierarchy mirrored structural organization. Their contemplation mirrored the logic that would govern physical law. Their stewardship mirrored the interdependence of ecosystems and nations. In this sense, angels did before creation what the universe would later do in physical form. Through these themes, recognition, understanding, alignment, harmony, worship, anticipation, stewardship, and participation in divine governance, a remarkable picture emerges. Angels existed within a purposeful, dynamic, intellectual, and relational environment before the world was made. Their earliest activities were not limited by matter or time, but expressions of eternal principles that would shape the very structure of the cosmos. As scholars explore the final layers of what angels may have done before the creation of the world, they encounter a fascinating shift in emphasis. Earlier parts of this investigation focus on alignment, worship, hierarchy, contemplation, and anticipation, activities tied to divine order and intellectual participation. But another dimension emerges from ancient interpretive traditions, angels as participants in the formation of the very patterns that creation would later embody. This does not imply that angels created anything. Biblical faith maintains a strict distinction between creator and creature. Rather, Angels existed as the first beings who reflected divine patterns, and in doing so, they became the conceptual blueprint for what the universe itself would express in physical form. One of the earliest patterns associated with angels is structure. Every description of the heavenly realm in Scripture assumes hierarchy, order, and roles. These features do not emerge as reactions to events in creation. They predate those events. This means that before the material world existed, angels were already living within a structured, organized, and purposeful realm. Their earliest activities therefore involved inhabiting an order that was not yet reflected in matter. When creation began, that same order appeared in physical form, in the precision of celestial motion, in the interdependence of natural systems, and in the regularity of seasons and cycles. Scholars interpret this as evidence that the structure governing creation has spiritual origins, rooted in pre-creation angelic existence. Another pattern reflected by angels is relational unity. Scripture portrays the heavenly host as coordinated and harmonious, functioning with shared purpose. This unity is not superficial. It is structural. It mirrors the relational coherence later found in ecosystems, where each organism contributes to the stability of the whole. Early interpreters argued that angels before creation participated in a relational dynamic that served as the prototype for natural order. Before rivers flowed or planets orbited, relational harmony existed among the heavenly beings. Their earliest activity included sustaining unity, a unity that creation itself would later express. This relational unity is connected to the idea of cooperative purpose. Angels are rarely depicted as acting alone. They appear in groups, assemblies, or hosts. This suggests that their earliest activities involved coordination and shared tasks. Before creation, these tasks were non-material, rooted in will, intellect, and alignment. But later, within creation, these same cooperative patterns emerge in physical form. Natural systems rely on cooperative interactions, and human societies depend on collective organization. The cooperative spirit observed in the heavenly host reflects a divine pattern that transcends the boundary between spiritual and material realms. A third pre-creation pattern embodied by angels involves communication. Throughout the biblical narrative, angels deliver messages, clarify visions, and interpret divine action. These abilities imply an early mastery of communication, not only receiving meaning, but transmitting it accurately. Before creation, angels appear to have participated in a linguistic or conceptual order where communication reflected divine truth. Scholars argue that this pre-creation mastery forms the foundation for the later use of language in human history. If communication began as a spiritual function, then human language emerges from a cosmic pattern established in the heavenly realm. One of the most intriguing aspects of pre-creation angelology is the connection between angels and cosmic boundaries. Several apocryphal writings describe angels assigned to winds, stars, and seasons. While these descriptions address their roles within creation, they also imply that the principles governing these domains existed beforehand. Angels, as stewards of these principles, would have understood their logic without yet interacting with physical matter. Their earliest activity, therefore, involved internalizing the structure of cosmic boundaries that would later shape the functioning of the universe. This understanding leads to the idea of cosmic rehearsal, a conceptual framework where angels engaged with divine patterns in anticipation of future duties. Early Jewish mysticism describes scenes where angels perform symbolic actions representing stewardship of creation. These symbolic acts do not shape creation. Rather, they express readiness. The heavenly realm becomes a place where roles are embraced before they are enacted. Angels learned the meaning of order before order became visible. They practiced stewardship before matter existed. They embodied roles before those roles touched human life. A deeper level of pre-creation activity involves the perception of time without time. While angels existed in a timeless realm, early interpreters suggest they perceived divine purpose unfolding in a sequence of decisions, even if not measured by physical seconds. This perception allowed them to anticipate future events, not because they could see the future independently, but because divine intent was revealed to them. Before creation, angels responded to divine decisions that existed outside temporal sequence. Their earliest activities therefore included engaging with purpose rather than chronology. This reveals a profound insight. Angels before creation were defined not by what they did, but by how they participated. They participated in knowledge, in worship, in governance, in unity, in stewardship, and in anticipation. Their existence reflected divine patterns without yet applying them to physical matter. These patterns were not random. They mirrored divine attributes: truth, order, harmony, purpose, communication, and relational unity. In this sense, angels acted as the spiritual archetype of the universe. Another dimension of their early activity involves the expression of divine presence. While God does not need angels to express his presence, Scripture often describes angels as surrounding or attending the divine throne. This imagery suggests that angels functioned as the first beings to respond to divine presence, embodying reverence, awe, and alignment. Before creation, this response shaped the atmosphere of the heavenly realm. The earliest environment angels inhabited was defined by divine presence, and their actions reflected the only reality they knew, one where truth and order emanated directly from God. This theme leads naturally to the concept of witnessing. Old Testament passages describe angels as witnesses to divine acts, especially creation. If angels witnessed the formation of the world, then their earliest activities included preparing to witness. Witnessing in the ancient world is a legal and relational concept. A witness affirms, recognizes, and participates in the significance of an event. Before creation, angels were the first beings who recognized the meaning of divine decisions. Their earliest role included acknowledging divine authority as the foundation for reality. Finally, one of the most profound aspects of pre-creation angelology is the interaction between freedom and order. While Scripture portrays angels as obedient servants, early commentators emphasize that obedience requires will. Before creation, angels aligned their will with divine purpose. Their earliest activities therefore involved choosing alignment, a choice rooted in harmony rather than compulsion. This voluntary alignment reflects a relationship between freedom and order that later appears in human moral life. If angels embodied this relationship before creation, then they established a precedent for ethical existence within the universe. Through these interconnected ideas, structure, unity, cooperation, communication, stewardship, anticipation, perception of purpose, expression of divine presence, witnessing, and voluntary alignment, a coherent picture emerges. Angels before creation lived within a realm defined by divine patterns that would later shape the cosmos. They were not passive observers awaiting creation. They were active participants in a spiritual order that existed independently of matter. Their earliest activities were expressions of principles that would eventually govern everything from the orbit of planets to the moral decisions of human beings. In this sense, the pre-creation era stands not as an empty interval, but as the first stage of a cosmic narrative, where angels engaged with divine truth before the universe reflected it physically. As the investigation into angelic activity before the creation of the world approaches its final layers, scholars begin to focus on one of the most complex and often misunderstood themes in ancient theology: the relationship between angels and the divine plan. This theme is not about angels contributing to creation. They do not create, nor do they influence divine decisions, but about angels existing within a realm where divine intent is fully present, fully known to a certain extent, and fully shaping their identity. Before creation, angels were the first beings to inhabit a reality where divine purpose was not hidden behind natural processes or human history. In that timeless environment, their earliest activities centered on responding to divine intent in ways that would later become visible in the structure of the cosmos. One of the clearest expressions of this theme appears in the concept of the heavenly council. Throughout the Old Testament, God is depicted addressing heavenly beings when announcing decisions of great significance. These scenes take place after creation, but their form suggests they mirror a pattern that predates the material world. Before creation, angels likely occupied a role within this divine assembly, not as advisors, but as listeners, responders, and witnesses. Their earliest activity, therefore, included participating in a governance structure where divine will was communicated and acknowledged. This acknowledgement was essential. It reflected the first alignment between divine intent and created beings. A second foundational concept is divine transparency. In early Jewish and Christian thought, angels were exposed to more of the divine plan than humans would later be. They did not know everything. Texts make clear that certain mysteries were hidden even from them, but they understood the broad contours of divine purpose. Before creation, angels appear to have been aware of the transition that was about to occur, the shift from a purely spiritual realm to a world where divine order would take physical form. Their earliest actions, therefore, involved preparing for this transition, not preparing the world itself, but preparing themselves to operate within a new form of reality. This preparation is connected to the ancient concept of cosmic anticipation. Several early interpreters argued that angels were aware of key milestones in the divine plan long before those milestones unfolded. They knew that creation would reveal divine wisdom. They knew that humanity would carry the image of God. They knew that moral decision-making would have cosmic consequences. And they knew that revelation, covenant, and redemption would unfold through history. Their earliest activities, therefore, included internalizing these truths and orienting themselves toward roles they would fulfill once creation began. Anticipation was not speculation. It was participation in divine knowledge. This participation becomes even more striking when examining the idea of roles assigned before creation. Many early interpreters believed that angels were not created in response to events, but were created with roles tied to future events. For example, angels associated with communication were designed for revelation. Angels associated with protection were designed for guardianship. Angels associated with cosmic stewardship were designed for natural order. Before creation, these roles existed as pure identity. Angels embraced who they were long before the universe required them to act. Their earliest activities, therefore, involved embodying these roles in spiritual form before expressing them in historical form. These ideas also intersect with the theme of divine law existing before creation. In Jewish thought, divine wisdom, often personified or conceptualized as an eternal attribute, predates the cosmos. Angels, as beings created before the world, participated in this wisdom. They internalized the principles that creation would later express physically: justice, order, truth, and harmony. Their earliest actions reflected these principles not through physical behavior, but through intellectual and moral alignment. They became living embodiments of divine law before the universe took shape. Scholars also highlight the importance of stewardship of moral reality. Before creation, there were no human choices, no historical conflicts, no moral dilemmas. Yet early interpreters argue that angels understood moral principles long before they were applied in human life. This means their earliest activities included perceiving the difference between alignment and rebellion, order and disorder, truth and falsehood. This moral awareness became the foundation upon which their later interactions with humanity were built. They guided, protected, warned, and participated in human history because they had already internalized the moral architecture of the universe. This moral awareness also explains why angels respond with such clarity in moments of human choice throughout Scripture. Their capacity to discern good from evil, obedience from disobedience, truth from deception, reflects an understanding rooted in pre-creation reality. Before the world existed, they aligned themselves with divine goodness, forming the first moral community in existence. Their earliest activity was therefore not merely intellectual contemplation, but moral positioning. They chose alignment with divine purpose, and that choice shaped the trajectory of their existence. Another theme that emerges in scholarly research is the relationship between angels and cosmic stability. Before creation, angels existed in a realm without physical instability. Their harmony was not the result of environmental balance, but the result of relational unity. When creation began, the stability of the cosmos reflected the stability of the heavenly realm. Scholars note the parallel between the ordered movement of celestial bodies and the ordered alignment of angelic beings. The earliest angelic activities, worship, unity, contemplation, and moral alignment, mirror the physical laws governing the universe. In this sense, angels lived the structure that creation would later imitate. This parallel becomes even more pronounced in the idea of divine presence as the center of the heavenly realm. Angels did not merely exist near the divine presence, they existed within it. Before creation, divine presence was the environment in which they lived. Every action they performed, worship, contemplation, anticipation, alignment, occurred within that environment. Their earliest activities therefore involved responding to the presence of God, which shaped their identity more directly than any created phenomenon. When creation began, divine presence became mediated through the material world, but for angels, the experience of proximity had already defined their existence. Finally, one of the most profound ideas in early angelology is the continuity between pre-creation order and the created world. What angels did before the universe existed was not separate from creation. It was the beginning of the same story. Angels lived out the eternal principles that would later govern physical reality. Their earliest actions provided the conceptual framework for nature, history, morality, and revelation. Creation did not interrupt their activity. It extended it into a new medium. This continuity reveals a remarkable truth. The universe does not begin in chaos, but in order. That order existed first in the spiritual realm, embodied by angels, and then in the physical realm, expressed through natural law. Angels before creation were the first reflections of divine truth, and their earliest activities were the first expressions of the patterns that would define the cosmos. Through these themes, divine transparency, anticipation, role embodiment, moral awareness, stewardship, cosmic stability, and alignment, a coherent picture emerges. Angels before creation participated in a realm where divine purpose was fully present and fully shaping their identity. Their earliest activities were not momentary tasks, but expressions of who they were created to be. As the exploration of angelic existence before the creation of the world reaches its conclusion, scholars arrive at a profound realization. The earliest activities of angels were not separate from the cosmic story that would later unfold, but were the first expressions of a unified plan. Creation was not the beginning of divine order. It was the materialization of an order that already existed in the spiritual realm. Angels did not wait idly for the universe to appear. They lived within a reality defined entirely by divine purpose. Their existence before creation sheds light not only on who they were, but on why the universe looks the way it does. One of the most significant themes in this final stage of analysis is the concept of continuity. Creation does not disrupt the pre-existing realm. It extends it. Before the world was formed, angels were already participating in truth, wisdom, harmony, and order. When creation began, these same principles were expressed in physical form, through the laws of physics, the structures of ecosystems, the predictability of celestial motion, and the moral intuition embedded in human conscience. The stability of the cosmos mirrors the stability of the heavenly realm, and the patterns within nature reflect patterns first embodied by angelic beings. This continuity becomes especially clear when scholars analyze the concept of cosmic celebration described in the Book of Job. The morning stars that sang together and the sons of God, who shouted for joy at creation, were not responding to something unfamiliar. Their celebration reflects recognition. They understood what was happening because they had already been living within the order that creation now mirrored. Their earliest activities, worship, contemplation, alignment, anticipation, prepared them for this moment. Creation was not a surprise. It was a fulfillment. This leads to an essential conclusion. Before the world existed, angels were already participants in meaning. Meaning in this context is not emotional or subjective, but structural. It reflects the alignment between divine purpose and created existence. Angels before creation participated in meaning by embodying divine patterns. These patterns became the architecture of the universe. In this way, Pre-creation angelic activity explains why the cosmos is comprehensible, ordered, rational, and morally significant. The structure of reality did not arise from randomness. It reflects the eternal truth lived out by the heavenly host. Another core insight involves the concept of divine presence as the origin of all order. Before creation, angels existed in a realm where divine presence was immediate and unmediated. Everything they did, worship, alignment, contemplation, stewardship, took place within direct awareness of divine reality. When God created the world, divine presence was extended into the physical realm. Natural law expresses divine consistency. The beauty of creation expresses divine creativity. The moral dimension of human life expresses divine holiness. In each case, the foundation of these realities lies in the pre-creation environment where angels lived in perfect response to divine presence. This connection provides a key to understanding the role of angels in the created world. Angels did not learn their functions by observing nature. Rather, nature reflects the functions angels embodied before matter existed. Their pre-creation activities became the template for their historical activities. They communicated before delivering messages to prophets. They worshiped before leading creation in praise. They understood divine law before guarding its expression in human history. They aligned themselves with divine purpose before guiding nations and individuals toward that same purpose. This perspective also clarifies the nature of angelic obedience. Obedience is not presented as mechanical submission, but as an expression of identity. Before creation, angels chose alignment with divine will. This choice was not forced, it was freely embraced. Their obedience reflects not compulsion, but comprehension, understanding that divine purpose is the foundation of reality. This voluntary alignment is one of the earliest activities of angels and one of the clearest expressions of their nature. It also explains their unwavering consistency throughout Scripture. A related theme involves the moral dimension of the heavenly realm. Although the earliest angelic activity involved worship, harmony, and anticipation, it also included moral understanding. Angels discerned the difference between alignment and rebellion long before human history introduced moral conflict. This awareness provides context for later narratives involving angelic obedience or disobedience. Their earliest actions established moral categories that would later unfold in human life. The pre-creation realm was the birthplace of moral order. Scholars also focus on the concept of purpose inherent within identity. Every angel was created with a role: messenger, guardian, steward, worshiper, or witness, and that role existed before the physical world required it. Their earliest activities were expressions of this identity. Before creation, messengers internalized communication. Guardians understood protection. Stewards understood order. Worshippers embodied reverence. Witnesses perceived divine intention. These identities were not assigned in response to historical events. They were embedded in the spiritual structure of the heavenly realm. Another profound insight emerges from the idea of pre-creation harmony. Before matter existed, angels lived in a unity that reflected the essence of divine order. There was no conflict, no competition, and no divergence of purpose. Harmony defined the environment of the heavenly realm. When creation began, this harmony appeared in nature, seen in the balance of ecosystems, the precision of planetary motion, and the interdependence of physical laws. The unity of angels before creation became a prototype for the unity of the cosmos. This harmony also provides an explanation for cosmic intelligibility, the fact that the universe operates according to rational laws that humans can observe and understand. Rationality is not an accident. It is a reflection of divine wisdom embodied by angels long before creation. Angels did not create natural law, but natural law mirrors the order they lived out. Rationality appears in nature because rationality existed first in the spiritual realm. Finally, scholars conclude with the theme of transition. The shift from pre-creation to creation is not a rupture, but a continuation of divine purpose in a new form. Angels did not cease their earliest activities when the world was made. They extended them into the physical and historical realm. Their worship became the foundation of cosmic order. Their contemplation became the foundation of divine revelation. Their stewardship became the foundation of natural law. Their unity became the foundation of cosmic harmony. Their anticipation became the foundation of salvation history. The activities of angels before creation, therefore, are not merely theological curiosities. They reveal the spiritual origins of the universe. They offer insight into why creation is ordered, meaningful, rational, and moral. And they show that the story of creation is part of a larger story, one that began before the world existed, within a realm where angels lived out the patterns that the cosmos would later display. In the end, the activities of angels before creation testify to a profound truth. The universe is not grounded in chaos, but in eternal order. Before stars formed, before time began, before matter existed, divine purpose shaped the first community of created beings. That community, organized, harmonious, conscious, and aligned, became the spiritual foundation for everything that would follow. Creation reflects their earliest activity, and the cosmos still bears the imprint of the order they embodied. This is why the question, "What did angels do before the creation of the world?" is not merely about angels. It is about the origins of order itself,